The rain hammered against the compound walls in eastern Afghanistan as Marcus Chun adjusted his scope for the third time that night. Most people back home thought Navy SEALs were all about kicking down doors and charging into firefights. They never imagined someone like Marcus quiet, methodical, and deadly from distances that would make most shooters shake their heads in disbelief. Marcus had earned his call sign Operator 7, not because of any dramatic battlefield moment, but because of a simple mathematical fact. In his first deployment, he had taken 7 shots across 4 months. 7 shots, 7 confirmed kills, each one preventing massive casualties among coalition forces. His teammates started calling him Lucky 7 until they realized luck had nothing to do with it. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, Marcus had learned to shoot helping his grandfather manage deer populations on their ranch. While other kids played video games, Marcus spent afternoons learning wind patterns, bullet drop, and the patience required to wait for the perfect moment. His grandfather, a Korean War veteran, had taught him that shooting wasn't about the gun. It was about understanding everything between you and your target. When Marcus enlisted in the Navy at 18, his recruiters had no idea what they were getting. He looked like any other kid from a rural background, lean, quiet, with calloused hands and an easy smile. During basic training, instructors noticed he never missed during rifle qualification, but plenty of recruits shot well on a range. It wasn't until advanced individual training that someone realized Marcus wasn't just accurate. He was unnaturally gifted. The first sign came during a long-range shooting exercise at Camp Pendleton. While other candidates struggled to hit targets at 800 meters, Marcus was consistently placing shots at 1,200 meters in conditions that made seasoned instructors curse under their breath. When asked how he compensated for wind drift, Marcus would shrug and say he just felt where the bullet needed to go. His SEAL training had been brutal in ways that had nothing to do with physical conditioning. Marcus could handle the cold water, the sleep deprivation, and the endless physical punishment. What nearly broke him was learning to work with a team. He had spent so much time alone with his rifle that coordinating with other operators felt awkward and forced. His instructors worried he might wash out not because he lacked skill, but because he couldn't adapt to unit operations. Everything changed during a training exercise in the Nevada desert. Marcus's team had been tasked with rescuing a hostage from a mock compound defended by experienced Marines playing the role of enemy fighters. The exercise was going badly. 2 team members had been marked as casualties, and the remaining SEALs were pinned down by accurate fire from elevated positions. Marcus had spotted something his teammates missed. One of the defending Marines was moving between positions in a pattern, using the same route every few minutes to check on his fellow defenders. Marcus calculated the timing, estimated the range at just over 900 meters, and waited. When a Marine appeared in his scope, Marcus took a shot that sent a training round center mass, eliminating the defender and allowing his team to advance. After the exercise, the Marine who had been killed sought out Marcus. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez had been running training exercises for 8 years and had never been taken out by a single shot from that distance under those conditions. He wanted to know how a sailor barely out of training had made a shot that would challenge experienced military snipers. Marcus's answer was simple. He had watched the pattern, calculated the variables, and trusted his training. What he didn't mention was the feeling he got right before pulling the trigger, a moment of absolute clarity where every factor seemed to align perfectly. His grandfather had talked about the same sensation, calling it the zone where everything makes sense. Word of Marcus's shooting ability spread quietly through the special operations community. During advanced sniper training at Fort Benning, he consistently outperformed candidates with years more experience. His instructors started giving him increasingly difficult scenarios, and Marcus adapted to each challenge with the same calm precision that had become his trademark. The real test came during his first deployment to Afghanistan in 2018. Marcus's team was assigned to a forward operating base in Khyber Province, an area known for its challenging terrain and determined enemy fighters. Within his first week in country, Marcus had proven that his training performance wasn't just range luck. Intelligence had identified a high-value target moving through a valley known for IED attacks on coalition convoys. The target was a bomb maker responsible for devices that had killed dozens of Afghan civilians and several American soldiers. Traditional capture operations had failed because the target never stayed in one location long enough, and the terrain made helicopter insertions extremely dangerous. Marcus's team leader, Chief Petty Officer Williams, had suggested a different approach. If they could position Marcus on a ridgeline overlooking the valley, he might be able to take the shot that would end the bomb maker's campaign of terror. The distance would be extreme, nearly 1,400 meters, and the shot would have to be taken through winds that shifted constantly due to the valley's unique geography. Marcus spent 2 days studying weather patterns and analyzing the target's movement habits. He calculated that he would have one opportunity, lasting maybe 30 seconds, when the target would be exposed while crossing between two cave systems. The shot would require compensation for altitude, wind, temperature, and the target's likely movement pattern. On the morning of the operation, Marcus's team moved into position before dawn. They climbed for 4 hours through terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers, carrying equipment that weighed nearly as much as Marcus himself. By the time they reached the shooting position, Marcus had already begun his mental preparation routine, a series of breathing exercises and visualizations his grandfather had taught him years earlier. The wait lasted 6 hours. Marcus remained motionless behind his rifle, monitoring wind patterns and adjusting his calculations as conditions changed. His spotter, Petty Officer Davis, provided updates on the target's location based on radio intercepts, but the final decision would be Marcus's alone. When the target appeared in Marcus's scope, everything happened exactly as he had visualized. The bomb maker moved from cover, paused to scan the valley below, and began crossing the exposed ground between cave entrances. Marcus made final adjustments for wind and elevation, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The shot traveled for nearly 3 seconds before striking the target's center mass. Through his scope, Marcus watched the bomb maker collapse, ending a threat that had terrorized the region for months. Radio chatter confirmed the kill within minutes, and Marcus's team began their extraction knowing they had accomplished something significant. Back at base, Marcus's teammates treated him with a new level of respect. Word spread quietly through the special operations community that Operator 7 had made an impossible shot under impossible conditions. What his teammates didn't know was that Marcus felt no satisfaction from a kill, only relief that American and Afghan lives had been saved. Over the following months, Marcus's reputation grew with each successful mission. He became the sniper that team leaders requested specifically for operations requiring extreme precision. His ability to remain calm under pressure and deliver accurate fire at distances that challenged conventional wisdom made him invaluable for operations in Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain. But with recognition came isolation. Marcus found that his teammates, while respectful, began treating him differently. They would defer to his tactical opinions and give him extra space during downtime. The easy camaraderie he had struggled to develop was replaced by professional respect that felt almost formal. Marcus began spending more time alone, maintaining his equipment and studying terrain maps for future operations. He developed routines that helped him stay sharp, daily meditation sessions, equipment maintenance rituals, and physical training that emphasized the steady control needed for precision shooting. The psychological weight of his role started affecting Marcus in ways he hadn't anticipated. Each successful shot saved lives, but it also meant taking a life from extreme distance. Unlike other combat operations where split-second decisions left little time for reflection, Marcus's work required lengthy preparation periods where he had time to think about what he was doing. His team's medic, Hospital Corpsman Second Class Martinez, noticed that Marcus was becoming increasingly withdrawn. During a conversation after a particularly successful mission, Martinez asked Marcus how he was handling the pressure. Marcus's response was characteristically brief. He focused on the lives saved rather than the lives taken. What Marcus didn't share was his growing concern about returning to civilian life after his military service. His skills were highly specialized and had no direct civilian application. He worried about finding purpose in a world where his unique abilities wouldn't be needed or appreciated. These concerns intensified as his deployment neared its end. Marcus had completed dozens of successful operations, earning commendations and respect from throughout the special operations community. But he also knew that his next deployment would bring new challenges and potentially more difficult targets. As winter arrived in Afghanistan, Marcus's team received intelligence about their most challenging target yet. A regional Taliban commander had been coordinating attacks across multiple provinces, and conventional operations to capture him had failed repeatedly. The target was known for his operational security and rarely exposed himself to potential sniper fire. Marcus studied the intelligence reports with his usual methodical approach, but this target would require techniques and distances that push beyond even his proven capabilities. The operation would test everything he had learned about patience, precision, and the psychological demands of his role. The success of this mission would determine not only the safety of coalition forces throughout the region, but also establish Marcus's reputation as one of the most capable military snipers of his generation. As he prepared for what would become his most challenging assignment, Marcus couldn't know that this operation would change not only how others viewed him, but how he viewed himself and his role in the larger war effort. The intelligence briefing took place in a cramped tent that smelled of diesel fuel and stale coffee. Commander Hassan Qadir had become a ghost in the intelligence community, a Taliban leader who seemed to anticipate every coalition move and disappear before operations could reach him. For 18 months, he had orchestrated attacks that killed over 200 coalition forces and countless Afghan civilians. Marcus listened as the intelligence officer laid out what they knew about Qadir's operations. The target moved constantly between safe houses, used body doubles, and communicated through networks that had proven nearly impossible to penetrate. Previous attempts to capture or eliminate him had failed because he never stayed in one location long enough for conventional operations to succeed. What made this target especially challenging was his operational area, a series of mountain valleys where elevation changes and unpredictable wind patterns made long-range shooting extremely difficult. The longest confirmed sniper kill in that region had been just over 1,000 meters, and even that shot had required perfect conditions that occurred rarely. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Afghan intelligence had identified a pattern in Qadir's movements related to his elderly mother, who lived in a remote village that had remained neutral throughout the conflict. Qadir visited her every few months, always following security protocols that had kept him safe for years. The visit itself wasn't the opportunity. Qadir never exposed himself during these trips. But intelligence analysis had identified something his security team had missed. During each visit, Qadir would spend time on a specific roof terrace where he could observe the approaches to the village while maintaining communication with his security teams. The terrace was exposed for exactly 12 minutes during each visit, long enough for Qadir to complete his security checks, but brief enough that previous sniper teams hadn't been able to get into position in time. The distance from the nearest feasible shooting position was 1,847 meters. Nearly 2 kilometers of mountain air with wind patterns that shifted constantly due to the unique geography of the valley. Marcus spent a week analyzing satellite imagery and weather data from the target area. The shooting position would be on a ridge that required a nighttime climb through terrain controlled by hostile forces. Once in position, his team would have to remain hidden for potentially days while waiting for Qadir to make his scheduled visit. The technical challenges were unlike anything Marcus had faced. At nearly 1,850 meters, bullet drop would be severe, and the 338 Lapua Magnum round he preferred would be traveling for almost 4 seconds before reaching the target. During that time, even the slightest wind change could push the bullet off course by several feet. Chief Williams assigned the mission to Marcus's team with unusual solemnity. Everyone understood that this operation represented more than eliminating a high-value target. Success would demonstrate that even the most security-conscious enemy leaders weren't safe from precisely applied American military power. Marcus began his preparation 3 days before the scheduled operation. He studied every detail of the proposed shooting position, calculating angles and estimating atmospheric conditions based on historical weather data. He practiced breathing exercises that would help him remain steady during the extended wait that would be required. The night before insertion, Marcus spoke with his grandfather via satellite phone. Their conversation was brief and focused on family news, but Marcus drew comfort from the familiar voice and the connection to home. His grandfather mentioned that hunting season was approaching and that the deer population on their ranch was healthy, a reminder of simpler times when Marcus's shooting skills served a different purpose. The insertion began at 0200 hours with a helicopter flight that took Marcus's team to within 15 kilometers of their target position. From there, they would move on foot through terrain that was technically controlled by coalition forces but practically belonged to anyone with local knowledge and sufficient firepower. Marcus carried his customized M24 rifle system, modified with a Schmidt and Bender scope, and equipped with match-grade ammunition that he had personally tested for consistency. Every round in his magazine had been weighed and measured to ensure identical ballistic performance. His equipment loadout had been stripped to essentials, nothing that wasn't directly related to the mission. The approach took 8 hours through mountain terrain that would challenge experienced climbers even in daylight. Marcus's team moved in tactical formation, with security elements providing overwatch while Marcus and his spotter focused on reaching the shooting position before dawn. By 0400 hours, they had reached a position approximately 500 meters from their intended shooting site. Marcus used night vision equipment to study the final approach, identifying potential obstacles and confirming that the position would provide the angles and concealment needed for the shot. The shooting position itself was a narrow ledge overlooking the valley where Kadir's village was located. Marcus set up his rifle and began the process of calculating environmental factors, temperature, humidity, wind speed, and direction at multiple altitudes, and atmospheric pressure. Each variable would affect bullet trajectory over the extreme distance involved. As dawn broke, Marcus could see the village through his scope. The buildings were typical of rural Afghanistan. Low structures built from local stone and mud brick designed to blend with the surrounding landscape. Kadir's target building was distinguishable only by the slightly newer construction and the communication equipment visible on its roof. Marcus's spotter, Davis, established communication with intelligence assets monitoring Kadir's movements. Initial reports suggested the target was en route to the village, but his exact arrival time remained uncertain. Marcus settled in for what could be a wait lasting several days. The first day passed without activity. Marcus remained in position, monitoring wind patterns and making minor adjustments to his rifle setup as conditions changed. His team maintained security while he focused entirely on preparation for the shot that might never come. On the second day, intelligence reported that Kadir had arrived in the village during pre-dawn hours. Marcus knew that the target's security protocols meant the rooftop observation would occur sometime between noon and 1400 hours, when lighting conditions provided optimal visibility for Kadir's security teams. At 1247 hours, movement appeared on the target rooftop. Marcus watched through his scope as security personnel emerged to conduct their preliminary sweep of the area. The distance was so great that individual features were barely distinguishable, but Marcus could identify movement patterns and count personnel. For 11 minutes, Marcus tracked the security team's activities while Davis provided updates from intelligence sources confirming Kadir's presence in the building. Marcus made final calculations based on current wind conditions, adjusting his scope settings for what would be the longest shot of his military career. At 1258 hours, a figure emerged onto the rooftop terrace. Intelligence sources confirmed through intercepted communications that this was Kadir himself, conducting his personal security assessment of the village approaches. Marcus had perhaps 10 minutes before the target would return to the safety of the building's interior. Through his scope, Marcus could barely make out individual features at the extreme distance, but years of training allowed him to identify the target's movement patterns and predict where he would be positioned for the optimal shot. Kadir moved deliberately around the terrace, occasionally stopping to observe specific areas through his own optical equipment. Marcus controlled his breathing and began the mental routine he had developed for extreme distance shots. He calculated final adjustments for wind, temperature, and the target's movement pattern, then settled into the shooting position that had become as familiar as breathing. At 1,304 hours, Kadir moved to the position Marcus had anticipated. The target stood motionless for several seconds, providing the stable shooting opportunity Marcus needed. Davis confirmed wind conditions and gave the final approval for the shot. Marcus's trigger squeeze was the result of thousands of hours of training and dozens of successful combat engagements. The rifle recoiled against his shoulder, sending the .338 Lapua Magnum round on a trajectory that would take it across nearly 2 kilometers of Afghan mountain air. For 4 seconds, Marcus tracked the target through his scope while the bullet traveled toward its intended point of impact. At this distance, there was no way to observe bullet trace, so Marcus simply maintained his sight picture and waited for confirmation of a shot's effect. The impact was visible through Marcus's scope as a brief disturbance in the target area. Kadir collapsed immediately, and the rooftop erupted in activity as security personnel responded to the unexpected attack. Radio intercepts confirmed within minutes that the target had been eliminated. Marcus's team began their extraction immediately, knowing that enemy forces would rapidly converge on their position once they realized the direction of the attack. The withdrawal required the same careful movement that had brought them to the shooting position, but now they moved with the knowledge that hostile forces were actively searching for them. The extraction was completed successfully 12 hours later when helicopter support retrieved Marcus's team from a pickup zone 15 kilometers from their shooting position. By the time they returned to base, intelligence reports confirmed that Kadir's death had already begun affecting Taliban operations throughout the region. Word of the shot spread quickly through the special operations community. A confirmed kill at 1,847 meters under combat conditions represented shooting at the very limits of what was considered possible with conventional sniper equipment. Marcus had achieved something that would be studied in military sniper schools for years to come. But the recognition came with increased scrutiny from both military leadership and media attention that Marcus found uncomfortable. He had joined the military to serve his country, not to become a celebrity sniper whose achievements were discussed in newspapers and online forums. The psychological impact of the Kadir mission was different from Marcus's previous operations. The extended preparation time and extreme distance had required a level of mental focus that left him feeling drained in ways that hadn't occurred after previous missions. He began spending even more time alone, working through the implications of what he had accomplished. Chief Williams noticed the change in Marcus's demeanor and arranged for him to speak with a military chaplain who specialized in working with special operations personnel. The conversation helped Marcus understand that his reaction was normal for someone who had taken on responsibilities that few people could comprehend or appreciate. As his deployment neared its end, Marcus faced decisions about his military future that went beyond simple re-enlistment. His reputation as Operator 7 had made him valuable to special operations units throughout the military, but it had also made him a target for enemy forces who now knew that American snipers could reach them at distances previously considered safe. The final weeks of Marcus's deployment involved training other snipers in the advanced techniques he had developed for extreme distance shooting. Teaching these skills to other operators helped Marcus process his own experiences while ensuring that his knowledge would benefit future operations. When Marcus finally boarded the transport aircraft that would take him back to the United States, he carried with him the weight of experiences that had changed him profoundly. He had proven that human precision and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. But he had also learned that exceptional ability came with responsibilities and consequences that would follow him long after his military service ended. The man who returned home was different from the quiet ranch kid who had enlisted years earlier. Marcus had become something unique in military history, a sniper whose capabilities had redefined what was considered possible in his profession. But he had also become someone who would always carry the weight of decisions made from extreme distances under impossible conditions. The homecoming ceremony at Naval Base Coronado was smaller than Marcus had expected. Military families gathered under California's sunshine, while politicians made speeches about service and sacrifice. But Marcus found himself thinking about the silence of Afghan mountains and the weight of decisions made in that silence. His parents had driven down from Oregon for the ceremony. They looked older than Marcus remembered, and their pride in his service was mixed with concern about the changes they could see in their son. During dinner that evening, his father asked careful questions about his deployment, while his mother worried about whether he was eating enough and getting adequate sleep. Marcus's grandfather understood without asking questions. During a walk around the family ranch the next morning, the old man simply observed that some experiences changed a person permanently, and that wasn't necessarily bad or good, just different. They spent the afternoon checking fence lines and discussing practical matters that had nothing to do with military service. The transition to civilian life proved more challenging than Marcus had anticipated. His reputation as Operator 7 had made him a sought-after consultant for military contractors and law enforcement agencies, but the work felt hollow compared to the life and death responsibilities he had carried in Afghanistan. A private military company offered Marcus a six-figure salary to train foreign military units in advanced sniper techniques. The money was attractive, but the idea of teaching his hard-earned skills to soldiers whose ultimate loyalties he couldn't verify made Marcus uncomfortable. He declined the offer and continued searching for meaningful work. Law enforcement agencies from several states approached Marcus about joining their tactical units. These positions offered the opportunity to use his skills in service of American communities, but the targets would be domestic criminals rather than foreign combatants. After careful consideration, Marcus decided that transition felt too dramatic. The breakthrough came through an unexpected connection. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a trauma surgeon who had served at the same forward operating base in Afghanistan, contacted Marcus about an opportunity with a nonprofit organization that provided medical care in conflict zones around the world. The organization needed security specialists who could protect medical teams while they worked in areas where traditional military or police protection wasn't available. Marcus's skills would be used to keep humanitarian workers safe rather than to eliminate enemy combatants. Marcus spent 6 months training with a medical security team, learning to apply his military expertise in a protective rather than offensive role. The psychological adjustment was significant. Instead of hunting targets, he would be watching for threats to innocent medical personnel trying to help people in desperate situations. His first deployment with a medical team took him to Somalia, where civil war had created a humanitarian crisis that international organizations were struggling to address. Marcus's role was to provide overwatch security while doctors and nurses treated refugees in camps that were regularly threatened by armed militias. The work proved as challenging as his military service, but in different ways. Marcus had to remain constantly alert for threats while watching medical professionals save lives rather than take them. The psychological balance felt healthier than his previous role, even though the danger was often just as real. During a mission to establish a vaccination clinic in a disputed border region, Marcus identified armed militants moving toward the medical camp. Instead of engaging the threat directly, he coordinated with local security forces to intercept the militants before they could reach the medical personnel. The incident reminded Marcus that his skills could be used to save lives in ways that didn't require him to take lives. The precision and patience he had developed as a military sniper translated effectively to protective security work, where early threat identification was often more valuable than accurate shooting. Over the following year, Marcus deployed with medical teams to conflict zones in Africa, Asia, and South America. Each mission required him to adapt his military training to civilian humanitarian work, developing new approaches to security that prioritize protection over elimination of threats. The psychological benefits of the transition became apparent gradually. Marcus found that sleeping became easier when his work focused on protecting innocent people rather than hunting enemy combatants. The hypervigilance that had been essential to his military survival evolved into a more sustainable level of security awareness. Dr. Martinez became a close friend during their deployments together. As someone who had also transitioned from military to humanitarian work, she understood the psychological challenges of adapting specialized military skills to civilian purposes. Their conversations helped Marcus process his military experiences in ways that traditional counseling had not achieved. During a particularly dangerous deployment to Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, Marcus's team was providing security for a mobile surgical unit treating victims of sexual violence. The emotional weight of the work was intense, but Marcus found purpose in protecting people who were healing trauma rather than creating it. An incident during this deployment tested all of Marcus's skills and judgment. Armed groups had been threatening medical workers throughout the region, and intelligence suggested that an attack on Marcus's clinic was imminent. Traditional security protocols would have required evacuating the medical team, but hundreds of patients would be left without treatment. Marcus developed an alternative security plan that utilized his sniper training in a purely defensive role. He positioned himself where he could observe all approaches to the clinic while medical work continued. When armed militants appeared, Marcus used precision shots to disable their weapons and vehicles rather than targeting the fighters themselves. The militants retreated after realizing they were facing someone with capabilities they couldn't match, and the medical team was able to complete their treatment schedule. No lives were lost, but the clinic's security was maintained through the precise application of Marcus's unique skills. Word of Marcus's innovative approach to protective security spread through the humanitarian community. Organizations working in conflict zones began specifically requesting his team for missions in areas where traditional security measures had proved inadequate. Marcus realized he had found a way to use his exceptional abilities in service of something larger than military objectives. His precision and patience, developed through years of military training, now protected people whose only mission was reducing human suffering. The psychological transformation was profound. Marcus discovered that his military skills, which had sometimes felt like a burden in civilian life, could be the foundation for work that felt genuinely meaningful. He was still Operator 7, but now that identity served protection rather than elimination. After 2 years of humanitarian work, Marcus was approached by the State Department about training diplomatic security personnel in advanced threat assessment techniques. The position would allow him to share his knowledge while remaining focused on protective rather than offensive applications. Marcus accepted the training position and found that teaching other security professionals helped him continue processing his own military experiences. Students were eager to learn from someone with his demonstrated capabilities, and Marcus discovered he enjoyed sharing knowledge that could save lives. The training programs Marcus developed emphasized the psychological as well as technical aspects of protective security work. He taught students that the goal was not to demonstrate superior firepower, but to identify and neutralize threats before they could harm the people they were protecting. His reputation in the security training community led to opportunities with international organizations working to improve security for humanitarian operations worldwide. Marcus found himself traveling globally, training security teams, and developing protocols for protecting civilian workers in conflict zones. During a training exercise in Kenya, Marcus met Jennifer Walsh, a logistics coordinator for an international aid organization. Their relationship developed slowly through shared experiences working in challenging environments, and Marcus discovered that he could share his military experiences with someone who understood the complexities of working in conflict zones. Jennifer had never served in the military, but her years coordinating aid operations had given her perspective on how military and civilian organizations could work together effectively. She helped Marcus understand that his military service had prepared him for humanitarian work in ways that traditional civilian backgrounds could not. Their relationship became a stabilizing influence that helped Marcus complete his psychological transition from military to civilian life. Jennifer understood the demands of his work and the importance of his continued service, even though the nature of that service had changed dramatically. Marcus proposed to Jennifer during a brief leave between deployments, and they married in a small ceremony at his grandfather's ranch in Oregon. The wedding was attended by family, humanitarian colleagues, and a few military friends who had also transitioned to civilian service. 5 years after leaving active military service, Marcus had built a new life that honored his military training while serving humanitarian goals. He continued working with medical teams in conflict zones, trained security personnel for international organizations, and taught advanced protective techniques at civilian institutions. His grandfather passed away peacefully during this period, leaving Marcus the family ranch and a legacy of practical wisdom about balancing exceptional abilities with regular human responsibilities. Marcus discovered that the ranch provided a retreat where he could process the demands of his security work while staying connected to his civilian roots. Marcus and Jennifer adopted 2 children, siblings whose parents had been killed in one of the conflict zones where Marcus had provided security. The adoption process was complex due to international legal requirements, but Marcus's security clearance and humanitarian work record helped expedite the necessary procedures. Fatherhood brought new perspectives on Marcus's work and its importance. He realized that his children would grow up in a world where their safety might depend on people like their father, individuals willing to use exceptional skills in service of protection rather than destruction. The family settled into a routine that balanced Marcus's international deployment schedule with stable home life in Oregon. Jennifer coordinated her aid work to complement Marcus's schedule, and their children grew up understanding that their parents' work helped people in places where help was desperately needed. Marcus never spoke publicly about his military service as Operator 7. The specifics of his sniper missions remained classified, and he preferred that his humanitarian work be evaluated independently of his military reputation. Colleagues in the aid community knew he had military training, but few understood the extent of his capabilities or accomplishments. Occasionally, former military colleagues would contact Marcus about consulting opportunities or training requests. He carefully evaluated each opportunity, accepting only those that aligned with his commitment to protective rather than offensive applications of his skills. 10 years after his transition to humanitarian work, Marcus received recognition from the United Nations for his contributions to civilian protection in conflict zones. The award ceremony was held in New York, and Marcus's acceptance speech focused on the importance of using specialized skills in service of human dignity rather than political objectives. The speech was brief and focused, reflecting Marcus's continued preference for action over words. He emphasized that his military training had prepared him for humanitarian service in ways he hadn't expected, and he encouraged other veterans to consider similar transitions. Marcus's story became an example for other special operations veterans struggling with post-military transitions. His success in applying exceptional military skills to humanitarian purposes demonstrated that specialized training could serve protection and healing rather than destruction. His children grew up proud of both their father's military service and his humanitarian work. They understood that he had served his country in 2 different ways. First as a warrior, then as a protector of innocent people in places where protection was desperately needed. As Marcus approached his 40th birthday, he reflected on the journey that had taken him from a quiet ranch in Oregon through military service in Afghanistan to humanitarian work around the world. The skills that had made him Operator 7 continued serving a larger purpose, but now that purpose centered on preserving life rather than taking it. The transformation had been neither simple nor complete. Marcus still carried the weight of decisions made during his military service, and he still possessed capabilities that set him apart from civilian colleagues. But he had found a way to honor both his military training and his humanitarian values through work that made the world safer for innocent people. No one talks about Operator 7 because Marcus Chun had found something more important than recognition. He had found a way to use exceptional abilities in service of something larger than himself, something that connected his military past with a meaningful civilian future, something that proved that warriors could also be healers.